a slow metabolism causes you to gain body fat and therefore gain weight. Brown fat draws energy from your dangerous fat. So here is good fat, brown fat fighting bad fat. And the great news is that there are foods that can activate that brown fat energy burning system. There was a metabolism study in which they gave people 2 to eat before lunch every day over 4 weeks, just 2, and it actually shrank your waistline. Intermittent fasting, which is your metabolic fat burning period, is when you think you're not exercising, you can't be burning fat. Wrong. You're actually burning fat when you're something very easy they can do that can help them burn down extra body fat. It's known as, I was walking around assuming certain things about metabolism were just true. For example, I had assumed myself that some people are born with a fast metabolism and they're thin as a stick. They can eat. They are seemingly can eat anything and not gain weight. And some people have a slower metabolism. You know how many people have heard, oh, my sister was lucky. She has a fast metabolism. And unfortunately, I was born with a slow metabolism. I've struggled with food my whole life. And you know, I've always had difficulty with my weight. That's a very common idea. That's one myth I walked around with. The second thing I walked around with, that if you ever seen a teenage kid, and you know the three of us, have all age before you know. Like when you reach that 15, 16-year-old level, you're eating 2 or 3 dinners, you're bouncing off the wall with energy, playing sports, running around like crazy. And at that point, and especially if you have your own teenagers, you would actually say, man, that kid's metabolism must be going through the roof as they grow, as they get bigger. That's what we don't always assume. The third thing that I always assumed, and I think most people do, is that, you know, once you kind of get into adulthood, 2-0, 3-0, 4-0 right there is really this inflection point where things start to be not so good for you metabolism wise. And the idea is that when you're heading towards middle age and then enter middle age, things are going to slow down by themselves. And that's why people say, oh, you know, I've hit 40, I've hit 50. Unfortunately, my metabolism is now against me. There's nothing I can do about it. I just got to buy new clothes, you know, or get used to my shape in the mirror, and that's a bummer. And then people give up and they're like, well, you know, it's not going to make a difference anyway. I'm just going to eat whatever I want now. So that's what I always assume. Now and then finally the last thing that I assumed about metabolism is that a slow metabolism causes you to gain body fat and therefore gain weight. And I always assume that that's how it works, right? So these 4 myths I just told you about were completely upended, completely up. They're all false. They're all not true, okay? From a research study that was just published about 2 years ago now. Okay, and in this research study, there was a researcher named Herman Ponzer working at Duke University in the United States. He worked with 90 other colleagues from 20 countries, and they took 6,000 people from 90 from across 20 different countries. And think about it, 20 20 different countries. You're talking about different geographies, different dietary patterns, different cultures. Everything is different, right? And what they did, though, that was really remarkable, is they studied people among the 6,000 from 1 week old. That's fresh out of the oven. The bun is just out of the oven all the way to 90 years old. Now you're talking about the end of the human lifespan for most people, if you can make it that long. All right? And they studied everybody's metabolism in exactly the same way. The question was, what does human metabolism really look like when you study everybody from 1 week old to 90-year-old? Never been done before. Okay, and here's the other astounding thing. It's important to understand how the study was done because, for you to really understand the results, they studied everybody in exactly the same way. They gave him a drink of water, and you're going, wait a minute. Why would water make a difference? How would you even measure metabolism? Well, water is H2O, right? Everyone knows that just from watching cartoons when you're a kid. Everyone knows that just from watching cartoons when you're a kid is hydrogen, O is oxygen. What these researchers did is they tweaked the hydrogen and they tweaked the oxygen in the lab so you could measure it. All right. Now, when you drink the water, you can measure from the breath what you would exhale. You can measure from the blood what you would remove with a blood draw, or you can measure in the urine what you pee out. You can measure the H and the O and what the levels are when they come out of your body, reflect your metabolism. Like that's basically one way of calculating a metabolism. 1 week old to 90 years old, 6,000 people, 20 countries, 90 researchers diving on this to say, what is the result, right? So what do you think? So what happened when they got their first results? The results of the metabolism was all over the map, just like you spec. Yeah, everyone's got a different metabolism, but because we live in the age of supercomputing, what these researchers were able to do, and what really broke the glass ceiling on this is they said, wait a minute, we know what every individual's height is, we know their age, we know their gender, male or female, and we know how much body fat they're supposed to have physiologically for their height and age and weight and gender. So what they did is they developed an algorithm. So this is like you develop develop apps. So basically this is taking something that can wind up being as simple as an app, but it's very complicated behind the scenes. And for every one of these 6,000 people, they subtracted the effect of excess body fat for their height, their age, their weight, their gender, all right, because everyone was different. So when they removed the effect of excess body fat and measure metabolism, all right, just from the data, from the numbers, guess what? The real metabolism came right to the surface. And if you want to say what it was, that the impact on the researchers, it's like pulling off the cloak for the statue of David. Like suddenly you realize what human metabolism really looked like from 1 week old to 90 years old. And there's only 4 stages of metabolism that we all go through. And what this means is that they discovered how our bodies are inherent intrinsically hardwired, right? If you're a ornithologist and you're studying birds, if you're a zoologist and you're studying tigers, you're going to be paying attention and just trying to understand what is actually happening. What's the natural cycle of these animals? And so what they did is they studied what is the natural history, the in hard wiring of how our human metabolism behaves. And we all go through 4 phases, every single one of us. And this is the beginning of where we began overturning every single one of those ideas that I told you I thought I was sure was right. Every single one of them turned out to be wrong, and that wrongness actually gives us like a eureka that our metabolism isn't our fate per se, but that we can actually do things to improve our metabolism. Let's talk about some amazing things about body fat that occur long before you worry about it, and that is body fat begins when you're in the womb. So when your dad's sperm met your mom's egg and they kind of combined and started to create little bulb cells and started to create the shape of a human. Some of the first tissues that form are blood vessels, because we need a good circulation for every organ that forms. Nerves that also form, and nerves run along with blood vessels. And the third tissue that forms is fat, adipose tissue. So we've got little globies of fat. You had fat long before you had a face to feed it, number one. Number two is that fat actually surrounds blood vessels and also is connected to nerves. And remember, we just talked a little bit earlier about this. It's an endocrine organ. It produces hormones that supports the function of our organs that are going to form later on. So this is way before you're even born. Number two, when you're born, think about it. Every culture in the world, every country in the world will appreciate the wonderful sight of a nude, pudgy, chubby. They've got arms and legs that look like the balloon animals that you twist, right? Big cheek, chubby cheeks, right? And in fact, fat in babies is something that we can associate with health. Look at how cute that baby is, right? If you actually saw a baby at birth that looked like a fashion model, chiseled jaw, thin stick arms and legs, you'd be really worried with that baby, and you'd be right. You'd think there was something wrong with that baby. And so, number one, like just from the get-go, got to realize that, fat actually has a role long before you peek at it in a mirror or step on a scale. And that's really a wonderful thing. And what happens is that as we grow up from that pudgy little baby, our fat starts to redistribute in ways. Now, boys and girls, actually, when you're 5, 7, 8 actually all track along pretty similarly. And the 3 kinds of fat, which is, subcut. Aneous fat, which is subcutaneous under the skin. Close you can see it. Visceral fat, which we need some of inside our gut. Viscera means gut. So the fat in our gut, and also some brown fat, which is we can talk about, which is a third kind of fat, most visceral fat and subcutaneous fat. You know the subcutaneous fat is the muffin, all right, your waistline. Visceral fat you can't see. That's the yellow stuff hanging off the chicken when you actually open it up. All right. And then brown fat is something that we only really started to appreciate actually exists in humans. It is paper thin. It's close to the bone. It's paper thin, and it's around your neck. It's behind your chige, your breastbone. It's under your arms. A little bit in your back, a little bit in your belly, and they all form different things. So healthy levels of fat are perfectly fine. They do all these wonderful things like the fuel cell and the cushion. But once you go beyond that, you start to disrupt the organ function, the endocrine function. You start to disrupt, cause inflammation, all kinds of bad things. So even skinny people need to worry about excess harmful body fat now. But that's not a gigantic surprise. I mean, I think people have been talking about that. The real surprise is there's a third kind of fat, and I tell Kay about this in my new book, Eat to Be Your Diet. It's called brown fat. Now, brown fat is not wiggly jiggly, and it's not under the skin. It's not subcutaneous. You can't even see it. Brown fat is not it's brown fat is paper thin, wafer thin, and it's amazing because it's not near the surface. You cannot see it. It is actually pressed along your neck. It's under your chest. It's under your arms like a bra strap, a little bit behind your back and between your shoulder blades, and a little bit in your belly. And this brown fat, by the way, doesn't act. It serves a very specific function. It is a fuel cell, a space heater. It generates heat by burning energy. Okay? And I get, for the people watching this, I have a little show and tell thing because this is what I've been trying to teach people. This is what brown fat is like. This thin paper, thin fat, it is like this. This is a torch. When your brown fat is lit, it does this. All right, it actually blows up a flame. All right, this is what brown fat does. When you light up the brown fat, and in order to power this flame, it's got to draw energy from someplace. And that energy it draws from that fuel, it draws from, in order to create that flame, that heat is that brown fat, thin fat, pressed down, invisible fat, draws that energy from your dangerous fat, your extra visceral fat, and your subcutaneous fat. So here is good fat, brown fat, fighting bad fat when it's in excess. And this is like a completely new conceptualization. And the great news is that there are foods that can activate that brown fat energy burning system. I'm trying